By Night in Chile by Roberto Bolaño is a 2000 novella. Um, Almost just about felt like almost like just about novel sized. Maybe about 4, 5, 6 hour read, depending. And I listened to it, which is going to be on an audiobook, obviously. But that will become apparent because of how little I picked up the fact that it's supposed to be written in the point of view of this scattered narrative of a priest, an aging kind of uh, former Opus Dei priest, which is a I just literally learned this. An Opus Dei is a faction of the Catholic Church in that's prominent in Chile. So I think, or sorry, I'm not sorry. That's actually Spain, not Chile. But it's really interesting because it's like Roberto Bolaño is he was Chilean, and he came from um, he kind of traveled. Yeah, so he was born in Santiago, Chile, but he traveled around a lot and died in Spain. So that kind of reflects his own life. This kind of a lot of back and forth, almost itinerant, I guess. So basically, this talks a lot about the Pinochet regime, which was a very disastrous, um, and there's a lot of so they're looking for the wizened youth, which that name shows up again and again. Like he keeps saying, like we're looking for that wizened youth, and a lot of this actually reminded me a lot of Samuel Beckett. this this inner cachet of just like endless kind of like, and then and then Pym, and then this is how things were, and like in how it was, it's like this, and that kind of fractured but just continuous stream of consciousness, kind of you know part Joycean kind of modernist, but also equal parts kind of postmodern at the same time. A little bit like Nabokov as well on that cusp. Very few are able to occupy that, and I think Bolaño does it really easily. He's like able to, but I found it a bit hard because hearing it, and then I was like, I didn't quite understand that it was supposed to be one. There's literally no, like, if you look at the book itself, which I'm gonna order. I swear I'm gonna. I'll probably reread it actually because of the because I think once you get into it, that kind of one stolid or like block of text kind of structure or lack thereof. I think that will kind of bear well more with reading it, at least in my case, because there are parts of it that kind of flew over my head. I'm gonna admit, try to be humble. But yeah, so there's lots of images of Marxism and kind of it is fictional, it is a part of it's like almost poetic too. And mind you, this is one of Bolaño's last books, I think, before 266, which I read. The only ones I read were Cowboy Graves, I think, was first. Which I'm not sure if that was the best place for me to start, but it was. This reminded me a bit of Cowboy Graves, but a little bit more frantic, a little bit more frenetic. I felt like Cowboy Graves was a little bit more almost like not homely, but like cozy. It was a little bit more like calling back to something. And that was like that was a bunch of short stories that kind of had almost like Dubliners had a one kind of theme of different short stories that kind of fit under the same kind of arc type, I guess. So Father Ureta, he is now slowly aging into senescence, and he's basically has it's a very unreliable narrator, a bit like Dostoevsky's Underground Man. He's very feverish at times, and you worry for his health because he's like talking like endlessly. He's talking about how he was trained in a falconry, which I also somewhat recently learned was it's a very particular kind of job that's basically getting and training falcons to within their natural area to become a bird of prey. So like they're getting them to seek out other other birds of lesser things, and that will actually serve him being a falconer will serve as a pretty interesting kind of metaphor later on for different things like the happenings and like the state and what's happening, and basically he's wanders around Europe. So he starts out in he is in uh, I believe during that disastrous regime of Pinochet in Chile, and then he's like trying to. There's like all these people looking for like the wizened youth that that will be um, cooperative, and like they're looking for uh, uh, people to kind of like basically kind of good old boys to kind of like work for them. But yeah, so they this so he's like they it starts out with a really interesting kind of line where he says, "I am dying now, but I still have many things to say," and then he goes on to talk about his priesthood and how he as a entered this Chilean kind of monastery area, and then ended up kind of leaving it in sake of a literary one. But he the funny thing is that his character, this took a little while for me to make sense, but he's talking a great deal about poets and like that transition from being a poet of kind of a small repute of like not really much um, traction in the literary world, and he's like kind of flying under the radar, and he might very well be a pretty darn good poet, but that's like it almost doesn't matter because he's not like blooming or blossoming, burgeoning with fecundity, and like like because of that, and but because he ends up switching his career from poetry to literary criticism, so now he's talking about other people's careers, and now he's talking about other people's poetry. He says kind of not in these exact words, but that the irony of of once being a poet and now kind of swapping that out in favor of a more kind of easy, like it's easier to just kind of nod your head and like and kind of bat your eye and be like, oh, I like this person's like not good, or this person's not they don't have like they don't have what it takes, or like the certain virtuosity of other authors and people. So he's like he takes comfort in that, but he's aware of the irony of it too, like the of the hypocrisy, I guess. So yeah, so there was also another kind of thing with the pigeons and falcons get in a kind of tussle, because he's basically there was at one of these like monasteries, I think he's like letting out a pigeon, and it's supposed to be the doves, the dove of the dove is supposed to be like the very symbol kind of hope, right, of like of a promise, of God's promise. And he's like they other monks let out this pigeon and falcon, and the falcon ends up like, I can't remember if it like ends up killing the pigeons, but one of the birds, a lot of them end up getting killed, and like and then there's all this pigeon crap that's getting like tossed all over the place, and it's like kind of like kind of remind me of Carl Jung in his memoir. I think it was called Memories. I think it was called it was Memories, Dreams, and something else, but it was his autobiography, the one later on in life. Obviously, it was one of the last things he wrote. But he talked about this instance of him attending a church when he was younger, and then there being in the midst of a service and I'm probably not getting it right, but there was like a bird that flew past and then pooped all over the like all over the I think the roof was open, so I think like one of the pigeons or something snuck in, some kind of bird, and ended up kind of like just soiling up the whole entire service. So that was kind of an interesting kind of a kind of irony, I guess. But this idea that they're supposed to be as peaceful creatures, right, the symbol of peace, and then this other kind of bird of prey that's like so right around then, so he's like he has a friend named Farewell, and that's another thing. I thought that Farewell was like had a name, like I thought it was supposed to be like Farewell. It stinks because like another thing is I'm reading is Virginia Woolf's diary, writer's diary, and like listening to it, I'm getting like certain things, like I don't know if like she's referring to someone as L, like period, or L, like ELLE is like the female name. So that's kind of a bummer, because there's parts where I thought like maybe Farewell, when he talks about this character, that he could have been a spelled in a different way, that it was like kind of not native to my understanding. So, um, but there's an interesting kind of mention of real life figures being, kind of inserted into this fictional time frame. So you have Pablo Neruda, who's a diplomat guy, but also a poet, and um, Farewell and Father Eurasia kind of stumbled into these people, and it kind of interesting because I think in Bolaño's own life, he tried to be a poet, and he initially didn't have much luck, and he had to kind of move around, and it wasn't until I think it was the Savage Detectives, I think, and that he was able to get enough. And yeah, there's some references to a lot of deathbed rants, and I think other literary kind of examples were William Gaddis's Agape Agape, which I have not read. I have read some of his essays, and I've read Carpenter Gothic, which I think I reviewed here. You think I remember? But yeah, so, and I would love to start on the Recognition sometime, just like I also want to start on Murakami's one Q84, but those are big, really heavy things. Same thing with, I'll just rattle them off, but the same thing with Fernando Pessoa's not the Man Without Qualities. The Man Without Qualities is another one by Robert Musil, an Austrian writer, and then Fernando Pessoa. I can't remember the name, but all of those are really big tomes, really big, fat, thick books. Some of them, I think, Musil's one is I think it's 1,300 pages, so I'm gonna have to make room for that. But I'm hoping this year will be the year of really, really big books, and I'll also review Kundera's The Joke once I'm done with it, but I'm only a third through, and that's not so bad. That's 300 pages. Anyway, but yeah, so I don't know if there's anything more I can talk about with the By Night about Chile, but it was very lots of political mentions, President Hollande, the regime of the Pinochet, and all these different people. You kind of see similar themes of the political and things on violence, and it's kind of viewed through a almost kind of semi-comedic satirical lens, but also through a almost poetic kind of world weariness, I guess. But not cynicism necessarily, but you see that with 1666, I think. You see a slightly similar kind of the literary circles, and people loving that one German writer. I can't remember his name, but they're all kind of almost stalking him and trying to get into his head, kind of. And he's a very famously reclusive writer, and they're all. And that one side, it's kind of, there's different pieces to it, and then there's the one piece of it that's set in Mexico with that serial killer or killers that was killing literally dozens of young women, a span of time, just kind of going through that. But yeah, that kind of same. There's little seeds of that I found in this one too. But yeah, that is By Night in Chile by Roberto Bolaño, and thank you for watching.